The Pelicans are one of the NBA's weirdest teams. Between the surplus of injuries and a flurry of offseason moves to add to their talented young roster, there are so many question marks. But what can we expect from them in 2026? Are they good enough to compete in the West, and what can we make of their future? Last season for the Pelicans was a complete disaster, doing basically nothing at a high level while winning just 21 games. And really, there's no further analysis required past the fact that they had maybe the worst injury luck in professional sports history. Brandon Ingram played 18 games, suffered an ankle injury, then they traded him to the Raptors. Herb Jones played 20 games, then tore a rotator cuff in his shoulder and missed the rest of the season. DeJounte Murray made it 31 games before he ruptured his Achilles. Then in March, both Zion and CJ McCollum suffered season-ending injuries. After 82 games, there were only 2 players on the roster to play in at least 60 of them, Yves Missi and Jeremiah Robinson Earl. With that said though, when there are so many injuries, the silver lining is that it creates opportunity. Players who'd have lesser roles are forced to step into bigger ones, and they can showcase some flashes of brilliance or even serious growth. The one positive for the Pelicans is that we saw this from Trey Murphy III. For years, he was exclusively used as an off-the-catch weapon, spotting up above the break and either knocking down threes with volume or showcasing his athleticism with explosive slashing against closeouts. But because the Pelicans were forced to run offense through him as a go-to scorer, we saw that he could be a lot more. Between off-screen action, high-level transition play, and the occasional isolation, he hit completely new heights as an inside-the-arc scorer, more than doubling his drives, shot attempts at the rim, and from mid-range, which also helped him increase his free throw numbers. Of course, more downhill scoring pressure also meant more playmaking responsibility, as he saw a big jump to his time with the ball, resulting in jumps to both his assist and turnover numbers. All that's to say, Murphy saw a significantly increased offensive load, with little offensive talent by his side, and remained every bit as efficient as he averaged about 21 points on 60% true shooting. So despite being absolutely ransacked by injuries and finishing with the 4th worst record in the league, it's not like the season was a complete waste. Now the question becomes, what does Trey's leap mean for the Pelicans moving forward? Because along with trading Ingram, they also traded away CJ McCollum, which to me shows that they're bought into Trey as one of their primary scoring options moving forward. And now with the return of Zion Williamson, he'll be able to slot back into a role that's more fit for his skill set. Before we get into that, I want to give a huge shout out to Factor for sponsoring this video, because this 31-day video series wouldn't be possible without them. Between the time it takes to research each team and produce these videos while balancing my personal life, I just don't have time to cook for myself. If you find yourself in a similar situation, whether it be work, kids, or relationships, Factor gives you the option of a quick, easy to prepare, and fresh meal that meets your fitness goals. All you have to do is choose your chef-crafted meal from the fridge and pop it in the microwave for 2 minutes. Recently, they've doubled the size of their menu to 80 plus rotating weekly meals, so whether you're craving a steak, a chicken breast, a calorie smart, or vegan option, Factor makes it easier than ever to eat clean. For me personally, it's bulk season, so I've been loving their Protein Plus options. But no matter who you are, Factor makes it so easy to fit a healthy lifestyle into your daily routine, and that's why I'm super excited to bring you guys a special offer. Head to factor75.com or click the link below and use code HoopVenueFB50 to get 50% off plus free breakfast for a year. You heard that right, that's code HoopVenueFB50 at factor75.com to get 50% off plus free breakfast for a year. All talks around the Pelicans right now start with this potentially new and improved Zion, because he seems to be in the best shape of his career, and he's expressed himself that this is the best he's felt since college. The hope is that by shedding some weight, he can stay injury-free for an entire season. If so, I think we can finally stop overlooking just how ridiculous of a player he's been when he's on the court. Even an overweight Zion is one of the most physically overwhelming athletes we've ever seen. Between the strength and power, explosive burst, change of direction, and a strong handle, he's impossible to stop from getting downhill. And even more so, he's a walking mismatch. Anyone quick enough to stay in front of him is either getting bulldozed or taken to the block. Anyone strong enough to absorb those bumps is getting beat in space. It doesn't matter if it's a pick and roll, a perimeter isolation, or a post up, he's putting his head down and getting to the rim. Then he's got the fluidity, touch, and vertical pop to get to all sorts of different finishing angles. It's actually kind of hard to wrap my head around how big of a presence he is. Going back to his sophomore season, here's a look at how each player has scored at the rim over the past 5 years. Of course, Giannis is the gold standard for interior scoring in this era, and pretty much that entire group behind him is filled with pick and roll bigs who don't create their own shots, and a few of the game's premier downhill ball handlers are sprinkled in there. Now this is where Zion lands, generating nearly 2 whole shots more than Giannis. There simply isn't a player in the NBA who can get to the rim in more ways than him, and while he isn't quite as efficient as Giannis, he's still made over 67% of those shots. Think about that for a second. He's getting a 67% shot 12 or 13 times a game. That's the equivalent of 1.344 points per shot, which is the equivalent to shooting 44.8% from 3. In terms of effectiveness, Zion's interior scoring is approximately worth shooting 12 threes a game at a 45% clip, which not even Steph Curry got to in 2016. Of course, it looks a lot different and defenses react to it in completely different ways, but in Zion's 214 career games, he's seen some of the most aggressive coverages you can possibly conjure up, and yet 2 feet in the paint is just simply inevitable. If he's not scoring or drawing a foul, that means the entire defense has collapsed and he's a good enough passer to find the open man. So as long as he's surrounded by guys who can finish plays, the team's offense is gonna be good. His best reads as a passer come on the interior, specifically dump-offs to the big man after drawing a rim protector. Yves Missi is pretty much the ideal vertical spacer as a 7-foot explosive leaper. It's a match made in heaven. As long as he's in the right spot, Zion should spoon-feed him easy looks. Of course, most of Zion's defensive attention comes from the perimeter, so you want to surround him with shooters. That takes me back to Trey Murphy. His ability to play off ball, space the floor, and torch defenses off the catch is exactly what you want next to a slasher. Also, Zion's own off-ball game complements Trey's increased skill as a creator, as he's a great cutter, off-the-catch attacker, and screen and roll big. After Trey, though, the three-point shooting on this roster is one giant question mark. Here's a look at how some of their guys have shot on catch-and-shoot threes in the last 3 seasons. Hawkins is there to be a volume shooter, but still needs to prove that he can reach another caliber as a shot maker. Alvarado and Jones are obviously big parts of the rotation, and will have to continue to prove that they can make defenses pay for leaving them open. By trading CJ McCollum, they did lose some valuable spacing, but they replaced him with Jordan Poole, who feels like a great offensive fit. Going back to the catch-and-shoot numbers, he's been close to 36% on about 5 attempts per 36, which requires some context because he takes a lot of difficult shots. Whereas a lot of these guys are taking stationary spot-up threes after being left open, Poole's often pulling from extended range, off of movement, or in tight windows over contests. So he's not the type of guy who defenses are ever going to ignore or try to bait into attempting threes at volume, and that's reflected in the numbers, hitting 41% of his wide open threes in the past 3 seasons. The thing with Poole is that off-ball shooting only scratches the surface of his offense. He's a legitimate ball handler who can beat defenders one-on-one or navigate his way to different spots on the court. He's also one of the game's better pull-up three-point shooters with the handle to create separation, the audacity to attempt anything, and the touch to make them. That combination of driving and shooting talent made him an efficient pick-and-roll scorer, landing in the 81st percentile at nearly a point per possession. Keep in mind, he was often playing without a capable screener, alongside multiple weak spacers in an overall disastrous offensive environment. Now he'll have one of NBA history's biggest interior scoring threats and another big-time off-the-catch weapon by his side when it's time to initiate. It really does feel like a trio of Zion, Murphy, and Poole has serious offensive potential. And speaking of potential, they took Jeremiah Fears with the 7th overall pick. He's a skilled combo guard who created advantages at will in college. Between a great handle, strong frame, and elite use of pace, his potential as a shot creator is through the roof. He's got the touch to score in a variety of ways, can play in isolation or off of ball screens, and has good enough passing and vision to develop into a legitimate initiator. Maybe most importantly though, he has high feel for playing away from the ball and just being in the right spot at the right time, which takes me back to that ability to play off of Zion. However, one of his major swing skills is the three-point shot. Can he be a reliable spacer? Can he demand serious playing time as a rookie? I'm really not sure yet, especially when taking into consideration the looming return of DeJounte Murray. Honestly, I've been sort of scratching my head at the idea of what this team looks like with Murray. If we take a look at the catch and shoot numbers one more time, he's easily the worst shooter we've talked about, as that just isn't his game. And functionally, he simply isn't effective playing without the ball. We saw that during his brief time with the Pelicans last year, and during his 2 years next to Trae Young in Atlanta. He's somebody who demands a ton of touches, but then he's a below average shooter that doesn't generate much pressure at the rim or draw many fouls. So he ends up living on a diet of tough mid-range shots, and that's why in his 8-year career, he's never once been even close to reaching league average efficiency. If DeJounte's on the court, it's for 2 reasons. One is to create offense for the guys around him. For as weak of a shooter he is, he's very aggressive, will force defenses to react, and is a really good passer. However, because he's basically guaranteed to take 16 or 17 shots at low efficiency and doesn't pressure defenses from behind the arc, I just think the offense functions a lot better running through either Zion or Poole as the point. The other reason he'd be on the court is for what he can bring defensively. His length, hands, and instincts make him one of the game's best turnover generators. Whether it's a pickpocket or a passing lane, he's just always making plays on the ball. With that said though, consistent steal numbers overshadow the fact that he hasn't been a possession-by-possession impact defender in half a decade. Sure, he can hold his own against most ball handlers one-on-one and isn't going to get picked on, but he has a tendency to fall asleep away from the ball or take bad gambles and basically never fights through screens. Now he's coming off an Achilles injury at 29 years old, and in order for this team to work, he has to fully buy into that defensive specialist role. Don't take anything away from Poole or Zion on offense, don't force tough shots, just set the table and then go all in on being a disruptor at the point of attack. because as things currently stand, this team is a complete disaster on defense. Herb Jones has an argument for being the best wing defender in the league, but he's going to be asked to do literally everything this year. Until DeJounte gets back, Jose Alvarado is the only other capable on-ball defender, and he's 6 foot on a good day. They've got a few big, lengthy athletes who can switch and cover ground, but basically their entire rotation consists of guys who you want to attack in the primary action. Whether it's Zion's lack of hip mobility, Misi's lack of strength and awkward positioning, Poole, or any one of the young guys, it's pretty much Herb or die on defense. I actually think they'll start DeJounte when he comes back for that reason, although I'd prefer if they go with Poole and try to go all in on offense. It could be worth it to explore Poole's chemistry with the core because he fits the timeline. He's 26 years old, on a roster that's built around 2 25-year-old scorers and a 26-year-old defensive specialist. More importantly though, you've got a 21-year-old big who can work with him in the pick and roll, and in the draft they selected another 20-year-old big in Derek Queen. I want to take a second to focus on the bigs, because I think the offseason addition of Kevon Looney is incredibly underrated. Looney might be the most limited athlete in the league. After a long history consisting of hip, core, and leg injuries, he can't really move laterally or change directions. With that, he's floor-bound while not being a consistent scoring threat from any spot on the court. Yet, he's found a way to be impactful on championship-caliber teams by mastering the little things. Knowing where to be and when to be there, knowing how to use his large frame to set huge screens, establish position on the glass, and clog up the paint. He's got 10 years of NBA experience exclusively playing for a contender, and I think that's the exact type of vet you want to mentor your young bigs. Yves Missi is the epitome of raw athleticism and not knowing exactly what to do with it. I think learning from Looney could help him a ton. Rookie Derek Queen is an immensely talented scorer who can play with or without the ball. Yet, much like Looney, he's a limited athlete who carries lots of weight, and figuring out exactly when and where to apply that size or how to leverage it could be huge for his development. Of course, this is all speculation, but at the very least, Looney brings his screening, rebounding, and overall IQ to the rotation, even if it is in limited minutes. And like I said, this roster has serious offensive potential if they fully commit to Zion ball. The only problem is that relying on Zion could be cause for disaster because there's a chance he ends up playing 20 or 30 games, and without his interior presence, they just don't have the pieces to generate a ton of offense. At full strength, I think they're fighting for a playoff spot, but between the complete lack of defense, health concerns, and not having many NBA-ready impact players off the bench, I think they'll find themselves in a really tough spot. I want to be clear though, I'm all the way in on healthy Zion. If he's somehow able to conjure up 70 games as an offensive focal point, the Pelicans could just be a legitimately good team because he's that good, and they've got just enough weapons by his side to be a top 10 offense. Unfortunately, that isn't a bet I'm willing to take, and either way, the defense still has a long way to go before they're competing for anything meaningful. The core is super intriguing though. Everything starts with Zion, Trey, and Herb. I think ideally you can bring Poole off the bench as an overqualified sixth man and surround those four with high impact defenders and passers. What does that look like? I'm not entirely sure. Can DeJounte be that guy for them? What about 18-year-old Jeremiah Fears? Is either one of Missi or Queen the missing piece in the front court? Only time will tell. But I think it's safe to say that if New Orleans finds a way to stay healthy, they're going to be playing some exciting basketball, and Zion might just end up producing like an MVP.